What would you do if you walked into your own bedroom and discovered your spouse was someone you never expected? Not a stranger, not a coworker, but someone from your own family. This is the story of Miranda, a woman who thought she knew everything about her marriage until one shocking discovery unraveled a web of deception that had been spinning right under her nose for months. It was supposed to be just another ordinary Thursday evening in suburban Cincinnati. You know, the kind dinner still warm on the stove, laundry folded and waiting, that peaceful quiet settling over the house like a favorite blanket. But sometimes silence doesn't bring peace. Sometimes it brings questions that will haunt you forever. Miranda had been married to Bradley for 8 years. 8 years of what she thought was happiness, trust, and partnership. She was the type of woman who still ironed her husband's work shirts every Sunday night, who packed his lunch with little notes tucked inside. Loyal, caring, the kind of wife who believed in the power of love to overcome anything. Bradley seemed like the perfect husband to steady job and supply chain management, regular churchgoer, the guy all the neighbors trusted to watch their packages when they were out of town. Their life looked picture perfect from the outside. A cozy two-story colonial in a quiet cul-de-sac, matching Honda Accords in the driveway, annual vacation photos on the mantelpiece. Real quick, stats show that about 95% of viewers watching our videos aren't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying this story, take a second to subscribe. It helps the channel grow and brings more stories like this to you and others who need them. Let's keep going. But here's something I've learned about perfect-looking marriages. Sometimes the shinier the surface, the darker the secrets hiding underneath. Then came Quincy. 22 years old, Miranda's nephew through marriage. Technically Bradley's nephew too. He was one of those quiet, artistic types. Wrote poetry, painted watercolors, kept mostly to himself. When he got into some family drama back home in Kentucky and needed a place to stay, Miranda didn't hesitate. Just for a few months, she told Bradley, until he gets back on his feet. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something wasn't quite right, but you couldn't put your finger on exactly what? That's exactly what started happening to Miranda about 3 weeks after Quincy moved into their guest room. Small things at first. Bradley started coming home from work later, not by hours, but just enough to make dinner go cold. When Miranda reached for him at night, he'd turn away, mumbling about being tired or stressed. She'd catch whispered conversations behind closed doors that would stop the moment she walked into the room. And Quincy? He stopped calling her Aunt Miranda and started avoiding her hugs, stepping back like her touch might reveal something he was trying to hide. Have you ever noticed how your instincts try to protect you, even when your heart doesn't want to listen? Miranda's instincts were screaming, but she kept making excuses. Maybe Bradley was just trying to be a good mentor to a young man who needed guidance. Maybe Quincy was just shy, adjusting to living with relatives he barely knew. But then she started noticing other things. The guest room sheets were being changed more often than they should be for someone who barely left the house. Bradley began shaving twice a week instead of his usual Sunday routine. And strangest of all, she'd catch whiffs of Quincy wearing Bradley's cologne, the expensive stuff she'd bought him for their anniversary. One rainy night, Miranda couldn't sleep. You know those nights when something just feels off in the universe? She walked down the hallway to check on things, and that's when she heard Bradley's voice coming from behind Quincy's door. Not loud, but intimate. Too intimate. She froze with her hand inches from the doorknob, her heart pounding so loud she was sure they'd hear it. She heard her own name mentioned, not spoken to her, but about her. And in that moment she knew. She just knew. But knowing and proving are two different things, aren't they? Miranda went back to bed that night, but she didn't sleep. She lay there staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with questions she was terrified to answer. The next morning, everything looked normal on the surface. Bradley poured his coffee, kissed her forehead, grabbed his lunch. Quincy mumbled a quiet good morning and disappeared upstairs. But Miranda wasn't the same woman who'd gone to bed the night before. She was done being naive. She was done making excuses. She started paying attention to everything, really watching, really listening. And what she discovered was worse than she'd imagined. It started with small pieces of evidence, a bracelet under Bradley's pillow, simple black and red beads that she'd seen on Quincy's wrist the week he moved in. Phone calls at midnight between the two of them. Deleted text messages that still showed up in notification previews. But the real proof came on a Tuesday evening when Bradley texted her that he'd be working late at the warehouse. Instead of going to her book club like she'd planned, Miranda drove home early. No headlights, no announcement, just quiet footsteps up the front porch. What would you do in that moment? When you're standing outside your own front door, keys in your hand, knowing that whatever you're about to see will change your life forever. Miranda pushed open the door and heard it immediately. Soft music coming from upstairs. Not the TV, not the radio, but something intimate and unfamiliar. Her feet moved on their own, carrying her up those stairs like she was in a dream, or maybe a nightmare. The bedroom door was cracked open. The lamp inside cast a warm glow. And when Miranda pushed that door open just a few inches more, she saw her entire world collapse in a single moment. Bradley was there, in their bed, but he wasn't alone. And the person beside him wasn't some random stranger she could hate and move on from. It was Quincy, her nephew, the young man she'd welcomed into their home, fed at her table, worried about like her own son. 3 seconds, maybe 4. But in those seconds, everything stopped. Bradley's eyes went wide. Quincy scrambled for the blanket, and Miranda just backed away like she'd seen something too big, too impossible to process. She didn't scream, didn't throw anything, didn't demand explanations. She just ran. Down the stairs, out the door, into her car, and drove until she couldn't see her house in the rearview mirror anymore. But this story doesn't end with a divorce and a fresh start, because sometimes when people are caught in lies this deep, this devastating, they make choices that turn betrayal into something much darker. Bradley called her phone dozens of times that night, texted apologies, explanations, desperate pleas for her to come home so they could work this out. But Miranda had shut off her phone and was sitting in her sister's guest room, trying to process what she'd witnessed. Meanwhile, back at the house, Quincy packed his bags and disappeared into the night like he'd never existed at all. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. And Bradley? Bradley sat alone in that house, surrounded by the wreckage of his double life, drinking straight from a whiskey bottle and making phone calls that would change everything. He called Quincy at 11 p.m. "I need to talk to you. Please." He called again at 1:14 a.m. "Don't shut me out. We have to fix this." By 2 a.m., he left a voicemail that would haunt investigators later. "Just meet me one last time." Nobody knows exactly why Quincy agreed to come back. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was fear. But at 3 a.m., he returned to the house where their secret had been exposed. The neighbors heard it around 3:15, a scream that cut through the night like a blade, then silence. When police arrived 30 minutes later, they found Bradley sitting on the living room floor, blood on his shirt, empty whiskey bottle beside him. Quincy was upstairs in the bedroom, dead from multiple stab wounds. Bradley didn't run, didn't try to hide the evidence. He just sat there until the police found him, and when they asked what happened, he said 5 words that would send shockwaves through the investigation. He said he loved me. But here's where this story takes another dark turn. When detectives dug deeper into Bradley's phone records and computer, they discovered that Quincy wasn't the first. There had been others over the years, young men who'd passed through their lives briefly, then vanished from conversation. Bradley had been living a double life for much longer than anyone realized. At the trial, Miranda sat in the back row, watching the man she'd loved and trusted for 8 years get sentenced to 35 years in prison. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she stood up, looked at Bradley one last time, and whispered, "I don't know who I married." The house was sold 6 months later. Miranda packed up 8 years of memories, 8 years of lies, and started over in a different city with a different name. She left behind the wedding photos, the anniversary gifts, and yes, even that bracelet, still tucked in the drawer, where the next owners would never understand its significance. This story isn't just about infidelity. It's about how secrets can poison everything they touch. It's about how the people we trust most can be strangers wearing familiar faces. And it's about how sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It destroys everything you thought you knew about your life. What would you have done if you were Miranda? Would you have confronted them that night? Would you have tried to work it out? Or would you have run, just like she did? The truth is, we never really know how we'll react when our world falls apart until it happens to us. We like to think we'd handle it better, that we'd see the signs sooner, that we'd make different choices. But betrayal has a way of making strangers of us all. Miranda's story is a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous secrets are the ones hiding in plain sight, in the people we love most, in the homes we think are safe. And sometimes, when those secrets finally come to light, they don't just break hearts, they break lives, permanently and irreversibly. The question isn't whether you saw this coming, it's whether you're brave enough to trust again after seeing how wrong you can be about the people you love most.